Well, the left went into predictable outrage over the weekend when the IPA's Director of Policy, Gideon Rozner, released a tweet. He went and filmed himself in the empty streets of Melbourne. I'll play a clip of it in a second. And he said that it's time to stop the social isolation and get the country back to work. He joins us now on Outsiders to explain his thinking. Gideon Rozner, how are you?
I'm very good, Rowan. How are you?
I'm very well. Now, you didn't say get rid of social isolation. What you said was to get the economy back and working. We'll just play a little bit of your clip and then you tell us about the outrage and then please explain your thinking. Here's a little bit of your clip.
It's time these restrictions were eased. It's time to allow for the sensible reopening of churches, restaurants, cafes, bars, community sport. Do it safely with appropriate social distancing measures in place. But do it, not in 6 months, not in 1 month, now. Because Australians were not meant to live like this, and we cannot allow this to go on any longer. Enough is enough. It is time to begin to end this lockdown now.
So I think we've got your message there, Gideon. Talk us through your thinking and what you would say to the critics. Oh, there have been plenty of them all weekend. You've had a real pile on.
Oh, look, if I wasn't getting death threats on Twitter, I wouldn't be doing my job properly. That's almost a KPI of my line of work. But look, more seriously, Rowan, I mean, you showed probably what's the most contentious aspect of that video, which is us being a little bit prescriptive and what we might like to see sensibly reopened in a careful way that encourages, that has social distancing. But basically our message is not that extreme and not that out there. The IPA says that this is a genuine and important public health emergency and there is legitimate role of the state to be played in containing that emergency, but in saying that, if we overreact or impose the wrong measures here, we risk creating an economic and humanitarian crisis that will far outweigh the disease. So we need to, maintain most of the measures, be it border closures, be it bans on large gatherings where there's a threat of the spread. But where possible, we should start to develop an exit strategy here and bring more Australians back into work, because every day this goes on, Rowan, we've worked out at the IPA that it costs about 71,000 jobs. That is a deep, deep crisis for Australia and something that none of us want to go through. Rita?
Well, you've got quite a reaction, not just from the Twitter trolls and the nameless folk, but from politicians. Sean Lean MP, if we could have a look at the tweet he sent. He is the president of the Victorian Legislative Council, and he did not mince his word. Oh, we don't have the tweet, but it wasn't complimentary, Gideon, I can tell you that.
Well, look, some Labor MP, will of course have a go at the IPA and everything else. And look, it is a message that goes against the grain of a lot of medical advice. That's the point that's been made to me. So medical bodies have not reacted to this particularly well. And that's fine. Look, medical bodies have a very, very important role to play and they have a very, very important perspective. But they're not the only perspective that matters in this debate. We need to take, if we listen to medical bodies alone, we would have banned boxing as an Olympic sport. We would have had speed limits of 20 kilometres an hour in most parts of Melbourne and around Australia. We need to weigh it up with economic and societal factors as well. We need to ask ourselves why, for example, jogging by yourself is permissible in the People's Republic of Victoria, but fishing off the end of the pier by yourself is somehow dangerous and will cause the spread of coronavirus. We need to think about how we'll be affected by loneliness if we are required to be under house arrest for much longer. We have to think about, the aspects of joblessness, and that's not just an economic cost or an income cost. That robs Australians of the dignity of work, of meaning, of social relationships of work. And sadly, as we know in Australia, when you do become unemployed, there is a not insignificant risk, because of our IR system, of never working again. That is a horrible, horrible thought, particularly, as I said, given the fact that 71,000 Australians a day are being plunged into joblessness. It's appalling.
James?
Gideon, I'm wondering what you think about the way people have reacted to the police and some of the policing measures in New South Wales and Victoria and elsewhere. Do you think that Australians have been too supine in their acceptance of this virtual police state? And do you think that people are afraid to speak out for being afraid of being tarred as somebody who just, wants to selfishly get on with their life but kill grandma because they don't want to follow the rules. Do you think that we've just been too complacent? And how are we going to, when this is all over, go back to getting the police to not harass us and not be stopping us all the time when we leave our house?
Well, you raise a really interesting point, James, because just like climate change, quite frankly, it's very difficult for people to be voicing dissenting opinions on some of these measures because the shutdown is a lot for a lot of people. Not for me personally, I'm used to it, of course, but there are people, since I put out my video yesterday, I got a lot of public tweets slagging me off and saying that I'm a murderer and all sorts of silly things, but I had a lot of private messages from people saying, thank you, I've been thinking this for the better part of 2 weeks, I can't say it to anybody, thank you for saying what I cannot. And people are very alarmed at the fact that the Australian Army, not just the police, the Australian Army is going door to door making sure people are at home. Can you imagine if we took a line maybe more like Sweden where we isolate the vulnerable and the elderly and people who are genuinely in need of protecting themselves, and we use the Army to create, for example, a souped up Meals on Wheels service to look after those people rather than treating the rest of us like prisoners. But on police powers, you're right. I think a lot of people are becoming more sceptical of the police. I think the absurdity of muscling up to people in the park minding their own business will actually weaken faith in the police force, which is another issue. But you raise another important point, which is WA, for instance, has released police drones that fly overhead, flashing lights and raising sirens and yelling at you if you're not home. Do we really expect those police drones to be decommissioned once this is over? We will have a permanent fleet of these annoying drones floating around making sure we're not breaking the law. It's not an Australia I want to live in.
Gideon, it's interesting, a friend of mine pointed out to me that if you go fishing in Victoria, if you can't stand on the banks of the Murray and throw your line in, you can get a $1,000 fine and 6 months in jail. However, if you put your feet in the water, technically because the high water mark is the border of New South Wales, if you put your feet in the water and throw your line into exactly the same place in the river, you are completely fine. You are not causing any problem whatsoever. This is the sort of ludicrous insanity that makes the police and the state look ridiculous, I would argue, and of course leads to a kickback where people don't take the serious issues, the ones you've mentioned, businesses with... If you look at businesses, Gideon, certainly in New South Wales, they are taking the social distancing seriously, they're putting things in place, and they're doing a great job, and the public respect it and carry on, but they won't respect these sort of lunacy, lefty lunacy ideas.
They won't, and I'm so glad you mentioned that. I actually had the president of a golf club here in Victoria email me yesterday, again saying thank you so much for coming out and saying what you did, because he has a golf club where most of the members are at-risk people. They are over the age of 60 or 70, and they cannot understand why they cannot play golf. For many of them, that's one of their few social outings. You know, what is the difference between going walking or jogging in a pair around the tan here in Melbourne and playing a round of golf in the middle of a vast, open, empty golf course by yourself? Wear gloves, sterilise the pins and the golf clubs and the golf balls and all sorts of other things. But there is a way to carry out these activities safely, and people are willing to accept, even me as a dyed-in-the-wool, hardcore libertarian, will accept there is a role of the state in protecting us from a global pandemic. But if the measures aren't sensible and if they go against the grain of common sense, people won't take them seriously and they'll just start to defy them, and then, frankly, we'll be in a worse position we would have been if we'd taken middle-of-the-road sensible restrictions to begin with.
Gideon Rozner from the IPA. You can go to the ipa.org.au to join up if you want to, or of course you can get onto Twitter and attack Gideon all day today. Have a great day, Gideon. I won't be checking your Twitter account till later this evening to see how you go.
Me neither.
Okay, mate.